Let's be serious, if you've been in the MMO sphere, you know quite a bit of them have to flop. As I've been journeying through all the classic MMOs that I missed growing up, I've come across some MMOs that simply failed to launch or just never really took off.
Stop! He's already dead!
And honestly, I've been fascinated with why these games fail. What did they do wrong? This list is in no particular order, and this is meant to be fun, so before I have the angry commenter who says, actually they were pretty good, lighten up and remember you can actually, in fact, have a good time online. Okay, so the first one that I really just want to poke fun at is Tarisland, which technically is still active. Tarisland was made by Loco Joy Games, and honestly, it looks kind of like a version of World of Warcraft with a lot of smooth, chunky graphics, I guess? I don't know, this launched in October of 2024, and it barely scratched a peak of 213 concurrent players, only to fall to an average of 100 per day, until their first update, which was recent in November of 2024, that only saw a spike of up to 583. And then it immediately dropped back down to 69 daily players.
Nice.
The reviews of the game mainly complain of lagging, crashing, character progress that for some reason jumps to level 41, and there's just a ton of microtransactions. I mean, let's be serious. It's a free-to-play game, so that could be expected, but it is just simply not received well, and it seems like many of the features ended up being pay to win. The game is very cash grabby, and I saw this one comment that said it is out to steal your information for China. Woof. Regardless, this mobile-looking MMO died before it even took off. Womp womp. Final Fantasy XIV. Wait a minute, you mean to tell me that the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV was a failure? Technically, 1.0 was kind of a flop.
How dare you?
So the MMO had been in development since 2005 and eventually released on September 30th of 2010. The game had its alpha and beta test, but when it launched, it was met with mostly negative responses. While the graphics and the music, which 14 is known for, were great, fantastic. The gameplay loops, the grinds, the interface, and all the other issues that happened with it kind of ruined the first impressions of the game, and it made it feel like it was almost incomplete. Square Enix did try to slow down the negative wave by removing the sub-fees for the game, but by then the damage was done. Now, a game series like Final Fantasy has extensive history, epic stories, great lore, and more, but trying to take a stab at MMO, it was a little bit surprising to know that the 1.0 game was just overall not well received and declined until ultimately the servers closed in 2012. But of course, you know that this wasn't the end of the story. I'm probably saying this wrong. Naoki Yoshida, or better known as Yoshi P, worked and developed the game into the absolute powerhouse that it is today. Most notably, the end of 1.0 played a Realm Reborn cinematic, effectively giving the players the knowledge of what had happened to their characters after their effort in the 1.0 story. It's honestly the best possible outcome for a game like this, let's be honest. The Matrix Online is without a doubt a hell of a concept. Imagine this, right during the peak excitement of the Matrix movie series, and then they turn around and release an MMO that you were able to play as one of the Red Pill Zionists who are fighting back against machines. This game, developed by Monolith Production and Sony Entertainment, was released on March 22nd, 2005, only to be shut down just 4 years later after very dwindled and small popularity. This game received mostly average reviews from game journalists, so you know if they're only reviewing it as average, then it's probably pretty bad. And with a lot of mixed feedback about the game becoming repetitive very quickly, and then the clunkiness of grouped fights, which apparently became either the best thing or the worst thing, it just wasn't what it needed to be. From what I gathered, the missions, which were the bread and butter of the game, seemed to be very akin to like Spider-Man 2's repetitive crime loop. Now I'm talking about GameCube Spider-Man 2. So the Matrix Online, you clear a floor of enemies and then you get somewhere else and do kind of the same thing or something very similar. It was just a lot of back and forth with the same kind of loop. It did have some positives, as the deep interactions between the three separate player joinable factions of the Zionists, the Machines, or the Metrogivians, I believe is how it's pronounced. It did receive a lot of negative flack because of the dying issue. When you died in-game, you had to re-upload to the Matrix, which took time. At the time of reviewing it, it forced the game to switch resolutions back and forth, which back in 2005, it took a little bit of time. So imagine this, you die and then you have to take a 5-minute timeout because of your failure. That wasn't that fun and engaging. I think one of the main issues that this MMO had, and the reason that it didn't take off, was because of, at the time, there were quite a few other big named MMOs dominating the market, as well as The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, the sequels to the smash hit The Matrix, did not really resonate as well with the audience, so by the time that the MMO was released nearly 2 years later, the popularity probably died down quite a bit. It's a shame, too. The Matrix was one of my favorite movie series growing up. I even liked 2 and 3. I thought that they were great. And I had no idea that there was even an MMO created in its namesake. I will simply say,
not like this. Not like this.
So I had to look up this one, but Vanguard, Saga of Heroes seems to be one of those huge MMOs that looked like they were going to completely reset the entirety of the MMORPG market, only to be released in an utter shit show of disappointment. Vanguard was being developed by several of the original EverQuest creators, and it looked promising. Let's be serious, EverQuest is kind of the big granddaddy of all MMORPGs. The game on paper was looking to be amazing. It had a bunch of different races, unique classes, a boat travel system, diplomacy system, and then the publishing deal fell through with Microsoft, and Sony Online Entertainment, or SOE, took over it and forced the game to launch about 6 months early. And if you are not aware, this will absolutely kill any MMO. These games take time, and it is nearly impossible to overcome a bad launch. It received GameSpy's biggest disappointment award of 2007, which is absolutely wild. Why don't we have those type of awards nowadays? I can think of quite a few games that aren't doing that well. Well, the bugs in the unfinished world really set the stage for the players not to enjoy this game, and even after the game was fixed, it was eventually forgotten about. Players marked this one off as a dead MMO and basically sealed its fate, despite apparently them going free to play and then eventually shutting down servers in 2014. I've seen quite a few trends of MMOs that have done this, and it's a shame when the publisher pushes a game out that isn't ready to be released. Where have I heard that one before? All right, Pax Dei is an MMO that I personally have had experience in, and unfortunately, I think it's dead on arrival. Now, it is still in alpha, and it eventually could make a comeback, but all the signs I'm seeing right now kind of show that it needs a lot of work to be done for this to happen. Officially releasing into alpha on June 18th of 2024, the game had a promising social sandbox MMORPG aspect to it, allowing for players to build massive structures and work together to overcome enemies and creatures. All of these things sound great, right? Well, the game unfortunately should not have been released this damn early. The reviews, that which I have seen, are already saying that this game is a giant mess. Outside the structure building, which is pretty good, the combat is janky, the controls are rough, and the crafting, which is essential to your player progression, is a chance-based system, which means that you could gather materials and still have your crafting attempt fail. Not only that, if you were one of the original supporters of the game, you need to pay $40 to play this game right now. Oh, and not to mention their most recent update completely wiped all the structures and camps. The Proving Grounds update basically wiped all player structures from their maps and gave all the materials back to the players, which is a plus, but all those hours of hard work that the early supporters may have put into the game to build their houses, their castles, have all been deleted. Many players have already written this one off as not worth it, at least not in its current state. Its early peak was fairly well received at 11,500 concurrent players at the end of October. That number dropped down to about like 300 to 400. The concurrent player average is floating at about 1,000, so this one has fallen hard, but given that it's an alpha, there could be a resuscitation, if you believe. Oh man, Life is Feudal. No, seriously, that's the name of the MMO. Life is Feudal is a hardcore MMORPG survival crafting style game that is available on Steam right now with mixed reviews sitting at about 40% positive. Oh man, this one has a lot to be unpacked. So the game originally released in January 12th of 2018, and it was apparently a crap show. Aside from the issues with the UI, the bugs, those all aside could eventually have been dealt with. The huge issue is that the game had a subscription and pay-to-win features. The game started with a peak of 5,331 players, but rapidly dwindled to 1,500 within a few months, and then between the years of 2021 and 2024, averaging a player count of 5. That is 5 players per day. Wow, that's low. So apparently you had to pay to play the game. Okay, cool. That many players understand that. I pay the money, now I get to play the game. Simple transaction. Then they switched to a free-to-play model with a subscription. So those who purchased the game were then asked to pay a monthly payment to keep playing the game. However, they received like a 30-day grace period where they got free playtime. Oh, and the free-to-play model? Yeah, that's a trial for 7 days, and then you must pay. The game is all over the place with calls of scams, money grabs, and honestly, it's a bit hilarious. Like, I mean, You can see these games coming from a mile away. They're just a massive cash grab. Some players pay the money to get into the game and then can't even get past the server authentication, and then like have to pay to get their characters back to load in or create new characters. It's wild. Well, regardless, the game's most recent reviews are mostly negative, and I'm sure you can understand why. This is a perfect example of what not to do. Some honorable mentions that I wouldn't say were exactly dead on arrival, but have since passed, would have been games like WildStar, which personally I never got involved in, and I kind of want to see what all the hype was about. There were so many people who swore by this game and said it was the best thing ever, and then there was others who said it was an absolute mess. Another one is a game that I have actually been playing recently, which is Warhammer Online, or Return to Reckoning. Originally lost much of its popularity and eventually shut down because of the heavy emphasis of PvP in Realm versus Realm, as well as the developers not wanting to renew their license with the Warhammer IP. There was also not a lot of other aspects aside from the PvP that MMO players could enjoy, such as like PvE instances, solo questing, and such. Honestly, this game is still a banger, and one that I have honestly been enjoying. I'm sure there are a ton of other MMORPGs that were dead on arrival, but these are the ones that I found to be the most prominent. Regardless of their approach, making MMOs is not an easy task, and something that takes a lot of time and sometimes quite a bit of failing. Now, did I miss out on any big failures? If so, tell me down in the comment section below. I recently have been playing quite a bit of older MMOs, and one such MMO is that Warhammer Online that I was just talking about. Holy crap, I fell in love with this game, and you can see my new player experience here. As always, stay caffeinated, folks.